All right, here we are. Welcome to Real Tart. And also, this series is called Gone, and it's a top secret history of my. Was a top secret history, my top secret history, I should say. Yes, I'm wearing a cap, and the reason I am doing that is even though the heating is on here in West Wyalong, in the Riverina, New South Wales, it's actually pretty cool this evening, and I've got the heating on here, but it's not brilliant. And also, I'm a bit fed up of just wearing baseball caps. I wear this hat every day, actually, at the moment. It's winter over here, just at the moment. Nothing severe like it is in the UK. It got down to 0 degrees the other day here. Good Lord, that was a big thing. Bit of frost on the cars. Yeah, it never really gets that super cold here. But I've been wearing it. Anyway, this one's made. I'll give them a bit of a plug, but I mean, nobody's watching, so it doesn't matter. But Tweedy's Originals, right, in the UK. Now, I don't know what's happened there, but they've closed down. Well, they haven't closed down their website. They've shut the shop. Shut the shop. That's what they've done. It was only an online service, but really making nice caps. Really great, made in Britain. When I got this one, they sent me, and this is a few years ago actually. Crikey, I probably had it about. Let me think. I could have had it almost 10 years, right? And they sent me a nice card with it, and they said you're the only person in Australia to have this cap. Oh, so there you go. Anyway, yeah, I don't have a lot of hair, so my head gets a bit cold. Anyway, here we are again, and we're going to go chapter 2 of the book Gone. I'll just hold it up again. It's always good to get it up there, isn't it? Here it is. Here it is. Where's that thing? Up. All right. Yeah. Oh, I can't manage that. How bizarre is that? Anyway, the book is called Gone. I wrote it for my kids back when they were 3 and 5, and now they're 19 and 21. Can you believe? And so I wrote this book for them because I thought there's always questions asked. When your parents pass. I'm not expecting to do that anytime soon, or ever. Actually, I'll tell you a funny story. No, I won't. Anyway, let's get on to the next chapter. It's actually chapter 3 in the book. And we're going to talk about Tom again. So the old man, my dad, right? And when I was reading it back through again, 2008, I wrote this, right? When I was reading it back through again, I thought, maybe I've been a bit mean to him, sometimes. And, he's gone now. It's not anything he can say about it. But no, I think it's pretty honest, to be honest. Anyway, but I'll explain more about all these things as we go through it. Okay, so Tom had a thing for cars, old cars that were never really very good. Okay, we didn't have a lot of money when we were young. There were 4 kids, and that must have been expensive. But still, Tom didn't see the point in spending money on motors. He didn't. The strange thing is about it, when we'd so he had he always had inexpensive cars, secondhand, never bought new ones. Do you know, I don't think he ever had a new car. He never had a new car, ever. And we had quite a few different cars over the years. But he ended up having a Jag, right? Which was kind of funny because he was like real socialist, and he wouldn't have viewed that as being a good choice, really, for a socialist. I actually picked him up on it at one stage and tried to rile him up about it, but he didn't bite, really. But anyway, there you go. We had one of those. Anyway, let's go back in time. First of all, we had a Morris Traveller. That's the estate car with the wooden struts along the side, the ones that rot, which they did. The Traveller took us up to the Yorkshire moors, but it didn't bring us back. The clutch plate seized in the middle of nowhere. Even though I was super young, I knew, because he told us, the clutch plate had seized. I have no idea what a clutch plate is. I spent about 20 years being a motoring journalist, driving loads of brand new cars. I still don't know what a clutch plate is. Anyway, it's a plate in there, isn't it, somewhere? It's attached to the clutch. Anyway, I guess it's something that, something moves against it. Anyway, it seized in the middle of nowhere, in the bloody moors it was, up in Yorkshire, yeah. So I wrote, it was like being in Wuthering Heights, what with the wind whipping the heather and storm clouds scudding across the sky. And any moment, I half expected Emily Bronte to rap on the side window and ask if we were all right. As the wind buffeted the car, Mum said, "You'll have to thumb a lift." Tom groaned and thumped the dashboard several times. which was not sensible because it was hard steel back then, not soft plastic. They didn't have any plastic inside them then. Bakelite switches, probably. He moaned, I'll never get a lift. We're in the middle of bloody nowhere. None of us said anything, but the little one started to cry. My sister Judith. She would have been very young then. And we all imagined being out there all night, or maybe even longer. Tom did thumb a lift and eventually got one, even though we were miles from anywhere. And I'll tell you, it's bleak out there. An hour or two later, a truck turned up with Tom in the passenger seat. The driver towed us to the nearest town and they put a new clutch plate in the Traveller, but not before Tom had bored the mechanic silly with a diatribe against the workers at Morris, who Tom said should stick to something they knew something about. He never explained exactly what that something was. I'd like to ask him one day. I'm just waiting for him to calm down. I should have asked him. I never did. You might think that sounds silly about asking him, but back when I was 10, I'll tell you what, a lot happened when I was 10 or 11. I was thinking about that today. There's a lot happened. Anyway, when I was 10, we were all sitting at the dinner table having our evening meal. Tom grabbed so there's 6 of us. Tom grabbed the tomato ketchup bottle and gave it a vigorous shake. Trouble was, someone hadn't put the screw on top on properly, and when Tom shook the bottle, it came off, and a geyser of thick red ketchup shot up in the air. It was like a time lapse thing. I remember this. We all looked up, including Tom, following its liquid trajectory, and then down it came, splattering on Tom's face, slapping in his hair. I think my sister was the first to burst into laughter, but after that, it was open season. My brother rolled off his chair, fell under the table, baying like a hyena. I banged my forehead on my dinner plate. I was so out of control. My mother was crying. My other sister was thumping the table. Tom sat there, a ketchup-dripping glower on his face. He got up, threw the bottle against the wall where it exploded, wounding the wall with red sauce, and then off he stormed, his feet beating the stairs. Even today, and when I wrote this, of course, he was still alive. Whenever the story comes up, we all burst out laughing. It's one of those famous things from the past. Except Tom, who still storms out of the room some 30 years after it happened. It's true. It's true. I think maybe now you can understand my reluctance to ask Tom about the men who built the Morris Traveller's defective clutch plate. It is true. I tell you what, he was always in a bit of a mood, right? He was never violent with us or anything like that. You know, he'd give us a slap if there was something going on we weren't paying attention to and all that sort of stuff, or we've been bad. But no, there was never anything like that. But what I reckon is, looking back on it, right? Honestly, we were so short of money all the time. It was absolutely ludicrous. I remember bloody toilet paper. We didn't have tissue toilet paper. Literally, this is honestly true. We had bits of newspaper, which he just, he didn't cut them. He just folded them up and pulled them apart, made them into toilet paper. It's the worst thing ever. I mean, apart from the fact it was useless on your backside and painful and horrible, it never went down the toilet properly, right? It was really dreadful. But anyway, they were so short of money, that's for sure. Can you imagine 4 kids? He was the only person working because the wife, my mum, she was looking after us, So when I was born, so let's say when I was 8, my brother was 6, my younger sister was 4, and the other one was 2. Can you imagine what a handful that must have been? Anyway, so I reckon, yeah, I can kind of understand it now, because when I had my 2 kids, it's a pressure having children, right? It's a pressure. One of you's got to start working for a while. I actually did freelance work. We'll get onto that as we go through this story, but I did freelance work when my 2 were born, and that was kind of okay. But yeah, it's not easy for anybody, right? Anyway, next up, car-wise, we had a Ford Prefect. I'd forgotten about that. Yeah, it was a cream. It was a cream, it was. One weekend, Tom made the mistake of putting several tons, that's what it seemed like, of garden slabs in the boot so he could bring them home and make a path. It's never the same again. I had a mate, sadly he's deceased now, many, many years ago, actually, probably decade ago at least, Mike, and he lived across the road from us. His dad was a mechanic, actually, as it happens. His dad was interesting, right? So Tom, I'd go around there quite a lot because it was just over the road. and they had the first colour TV in the street. They seriously did. I remember going over there and watching it. Oh my God, that was such a wonderful, wonderful thing. And I was sitting on the sofa next to his dad, and his dad's stomach was rumbling, like rumbling all the time. That's what it did all the time. I don't know what was going on there. Anyway, there you go. But yeah, Mike said to me years later when we were adults, he said, "Do you remember the Ford Prefect?" He said, "Those springs were never the same again." No, they weren't. I believe Tom thought he'd save some money. That will be definitely the case. By not having the slabs delivered by truck, but in the event, we ended up with a car whose nose reached for the stars and whose rear suspension no longer suspended very much at all. It's absolutely true. The only thing I remember, so bringing back memories, is the only other thing I remember about the Prefect is that it had a top speed of 60 miles per hour and that downhill, Tom regularly reached it, seemingly by gritting his teeth and rocking back and forth in the driver's seat. This is what he did, coaxing it, willing it to go faster. It never did. But it gave rise to my mother's expression for all of her life. It was going 60 miles an hour for anything that was traveling at high speed. So 60 miles an hour, that's, what's that, 110, 115 kilometers an hour. Tom's next move was into a Ford Thames Trader. Yeah, the Trader was a van, but in this particular instance, this model with windows on the sides. So really, it was the first people mover you ever saw, though in those days, of course, it was known as a camper van. I think, so they were made between 1957 and 1965, and he would have bought it secondhand. So this would have been in the late 60s, late 60s, I reckon. Anyway, he set to work on the Thames, and also I've got to tell you, he's a scientist, right? He was a science teacher. He was not very good at practical things. I'm useless at practical things, I've got to say. But he wasn't great at them. Anyway, what he did was, soon he set to work on the Thames, and soon there was a chipboard table in there between the two sets of seats. So there was a rear seat, and there was another seat, two seats, I think, well, a two-seater bench seat facing the back bench, which was like a three-seater. Then there was also, strangely enough, by the door, there was like a fold-up seat. So you had to fold it up to get in. I used to like sitting in that sometimes. Yeah, I always like being in my own seat. Anyway, he set to work on the Thames. Soon there was a chipboard table in there between the two sets of seats. Right, so there you go. He unbolted the two-seater bench, turned it around so it faced the three-seater bench. That's what he did. At the back of the van, chipboard table went in the middle so we could all sit there and eat our meals. Now, the suspension on the Thames Trader was hard, more like rock hard. It had to be. After it was supposed to be a van, right, capable of carrying things like slabs. The thing was, because of the hard springs, if the journey was anything over 10 miles, the table used to shake itself loose from the hinges that Tom had put in, and eventually it would collapse onto the floor with an almighty bang. Us kids used to watch it intently as it vibrated, and as the speed of the vehicle increased, the vibration also increased until the noise in the back was deafening. I'm not kidding. It was like that creature. What's that bloody film where the creature comes out of the woman's stomach? Oh, God, it's gone out of my mind. Anyway, it'll come back. But this thing would chitter away. It'd chitter away, right? As he was driving, Tom would shout back over the roar of the unsuppressed engine and the chattering chipboard table, "Hold the table, hold it down, Jesus, hold it." But he'd always collapse sooner or later, and up front, Tom would groan out loud and say, "Now I've got to bloody well screw it all back together again, oh Jesus." The engine sat under the van and between the two front seats, and the heat from the engine cover was terrific. In the summer months, being inside the Trader was like traveling across the Gobi Desert. Obviously, I've never been there, so I wouldn't write that now. But anyway, I believe you could have cooked bacon and eggs on the metal cover in about 30 seconds. It probably would have slid off, but you could probably. If you had a mind to, and this is true, you could unlatch the engine cover easily, right? And there, you could definitely do this. And fling it open and lie down and watch the road down below fly past, right below the engine. I used to imagine I was on a Lancaster bomber on a low-flying mission over Germany. In fact, we only had it open once. I think it's probably true, actually, once or twice. because Tom ran over a hedgehog, which got scooped up by the wheel, flung up through the engine, the open engine, narrowly missing us kids, but impaling itself on its own spikes on the headlining of the roof. It happened very quickly. Tom had to pull over and he cursed and cursed. Bloody hedgehogs, he bellowed as he unscrewed the poor animal from the roof lining. Shouldn't be allowed on the bloody road. Jesus. Well, huffed my mother, you really were going at least 60 miles an hour. The very back seat was higher than all the other seats, I think because of the hard raised rear suspension. And so anyone who sat there was as obvious as the Pope on a tour. You know how the Pope used to do that, didn't he? Pope-mobile, specially made vehicle. Everybody could see him. Thanks to the super hard springs, if you were on the rear seat when the Thames Trader was going at full pelt, you couldn't help but bounce up and down, even on a relatively flat road surface. It was really annoying. When it became bumpy, it was like riding a bucking horse. Sometimes, because we were just kids, we'd all cram on the bounce onto the bouncing seat for fun. I mean, you wouldn't now. You'd go, oh, I don't want that. It's annoying. This is true. One day, we're all sitting there, all four of us. We're on the motorway. We hit a patch of not too so much bumpy, but I suppose undulating road, and the Thames started bouncing. Up front, Tom shouted above the blare of the engine, "Hold on!" and fought with the steering wheel as my mother clutched the sides of her seat. In the back, she did that a lot, actually, when he was driving. She never learned to drive. She tried, and she failed her test once or twice. I don't know. I mean, I failed 3 times, can you believe, and became a world-famous motoring journalist. When I came to Australia, I had to do the test again, the Aussie test. I failed the theory test 3 times. I just thought I knew what I was doing. Anyway, hold on, he said, fighting with the steering wheel. A car coming past us in the fast lane slowed. It was full of youngsters. I reckon they were all in the late teens. All 5 of them were looking at us and pointing, and then the 3 in the back saw us bobbing up and down. And there was nothing we could do to stop it. We just couldn't. It just kept bobbing up and down. And then they all started bobbing up and down too. Then the driver and passenger also started bobbing. They kept level with us for about 5 minutes, much to our embarrassment. And then Tom saw them and started to accelerate. As they came alongside us again, Tom started doing the rocking thing to somehow make the van go faster, willing it on. The youngsters in the car started pointing at Tom, and then they all started rocking and bouncing and rocking. Neither of our vehicles could go any faster, so they kept abreast of us for maybe 10 miles. Eventually, us kids slid down onto the floor. The embarrassment was too much. "What the hell are you kids doing?" shouted Tom from up front as he struggled with the steering. "Get back up on that bloody seat. People would think there's something bloody well wrong with you." Tom eventually realized the Thames didn't have any more speed, and he groaned and let up on the accelerator, and the car sped off up the road. The passengers kept bouncing until we couldn't see them anymore. Another day, we were going to the shops, and us kids must have been fighting in the back, and Tom shouted, "Shut up in the back there, you bloody kids. All day you've been whining, shut up." So we did, right? We thought we're not going to talk to him. We all sat there quiet as mice while Tom's temper sizzled up front. We drove into a car park. This was in Leicester, right? We used to live in the Midlands in Leicestershire, near Market Bosworth and Husbands Bosworth, can you believe, right? That's my surname. Anyway, we drove into a car park. This is not a multi-story. In those days, there were loads of car parks on waste ground. Seriously, there were. In those days, I'm just reading the same thing. You paid some bloke, and he raised a bent metal pipe, and you went in and drove around looking for a space. So there we were, driving around this fairly full car park. Tom muttering about paying his money. It's probably about, I don't know what it was. It's probably about 20 pence or something. Actually, back then, it wouldn't have been metric. It's probably something like a shilling or a sixpence or something. Anyway, so he'd driven and he paid the bloke, and he couldn't find a parking space at first. And all 4 of us kids were on the high back seat, as far away from Tom as it was possible to be. He was driving slowly, and eventually Mum spotted a parking space, and Tom grumbled and said, "I'll never get in there. Jesus, it's impossible." But he fought with the gear lever, which always made the most amazing groaning and whining and crunching noises when Tom was trying to make it go in any direction. Eventually, he let out a great cry as if he was murdering someone and banged it into reverse. Us kids all turned and looked over the back seat, down behind us. There was a woman in a Mini right there. looking up at us with terrified eyes as the trader started to jolt back towards her. From the height of the trader, it appeared to us that she was in a toy car. We started to go back. The car went back, the trader went back, and I saw her put her hand on the horn, but it was a Mini, so it didn't blare, it just peeped. Tom didn't hear it over the sound of the trader's engine. Of course, he couldn't see the diminutive Mini because it was way below the trader's rear end. We all kept staring out the back as Tom inched us closer and closer to the car. The woman, who was rather fat for a Mini, can't say that now, can you, fat? She was rather fat for a Mini, was struggling with the door and got it, and eventually got it open and got out of the car just as the trader made contact, the rear bumper crunching against the windscreen and shattering the glass. Tom was looking back, but he still couldn't see the car, which by now he'd started to push backwards. The woman came up to Tom's window and rapped on the glass. Tom looked at her and shouted, "Not now, madam, trying to park." And he did, and accelerated harder, pushing the Mini back again until it made contact with another parked car, and then Tom stalled the trader. He huffed and puffed and then groaned and said to us all, "See, bloody well stalled." Then he looked back at the woman still standing there outside, her mouth gawping open, and said in an exasperated tone, "Now, madam, what can I do for you?" We watched them, our chins on the back seat, as Tom stood all mute, looking at the damage to the Mini, listening to the woman, who was by now almost hysterical. "I really would have thought that your children would have said something," said the woman. "They were all looking at me as you had mounted my car." Tom looked around. We were sure of it, even though we ducked down below the seat. Quivering with a kind of evil excitement, we could feel his laser-like stare searching for us through the metal doors and the vinyl seat back. That's honestly all true. Anyway, there we go. It's quite a long one, that. 21 minutes, 52. Anyway, look, I hope you've enjoyed it. We'll move on to the next one. Now, the next one is about... Yeah, it's interesting, actually. I kind of feel like, looking back on the book, there's a few things I've left out. Yeah, I'm not sure why. Some of it's a bit self-censorship, but some of it I've missed out. Anyway, that's okay. I'm going to talk about becoming a journalist. Before that, actually, in the next episode, I'll talk about those intervening years before I became a journalist, because I'm kind of 11 at the moment, right? Where we are. And there's all sorts of things happened when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, right? And we've got to explore those, and I need to put them in the book. I'm going to rewrite this. I've already decided that. I don't know if the kids will ever want it, but it's important to do. You know, it's important to do. The bishop mentioned before, Stuart Robinson, he sent me an email today, and he said, "Listen, you really should write a book for everyone to read, not just for your family." And I said, "Yeah, but it takes so long to write a book, and you can never get the damn thing published, you know." And anyway, I said, "Look, I reckon a podcast is probably the way to go." And anyways, he loves podcasts, and he said, "Yeah, I think that's really good." I like talking to him. He's an intelligent bloke. You know, there aren't that many around, quite frankly. Anyway, there you go. I'm gonna have an early-ish night tonight, and yeah, I'll talk to you again tomorrow, I guess, or well, I was going to say the day after, probably tomorrow. Okay, so there you go, something to look forward to. All righty, thanks very much, and listen, just take care, folks, and have a good evening, afternoon, or morning out there, wherever you are in the world, and yeah, talk to you soon. Goodbye.